32% interest rate. Could we call that usury?
You mean on your credit card or something? Who's got to be only the mafia charges that.
Oh no. Hey, you probably don't know Norm, but like there are tons of people that back cars at 27, 29% interest rates.
Who's doing that?
Lots of people in the black community. I can speak to lots of people in the black community have a 25% interest rate.
On what kind of a loan?
It's buy here, pay here, Norm. It's lots of buy here, pay here.
Buy here, pay here? What is that?
You know, little lots that you see, buy here, pay here. They say how out in the country, maybe not where you live, but like out in the country or rural, I don't know, suburbia, you might find these little car lots, and it might say buy here, pay here, and they'll come up with some pretty nasty looking loans.
Well, you wouldn't buy something that gave you a bad rate, would you?
Okay, but if you needed that product and you didn't have the money, or at least if you perceive that you need that product, a lot of people do, in America in particular, perceive they may need something, and they do make themselves poorer by buying that, but that don't change the fact that people wouldn't do it. Like would you call 17% usury? Would 17% be usury?
Okay, sorry.
I've never heard of such a thing. I've never heard that term used except for anybody except for Jews as a derogatory term.
Okay, sorry. Let me clear something up here because I think we're getting hung up on the usury term. I've just found it. In medieval English law, usury was defined as any interest charged on a loan, no matter how small. So that we don't use it in the same way today. And it says here the Catholic Church forbids Christians from lending money to other Christians at interest, based on Vulgate's translation of Luke 6:35. Usury was generally seen as immoral and punishable, and offenders were subject to excommunication from the Catholic Church. So this is where I'm wondering, Norm, if there could be some truth to like that particular kind of job back then in medieval times.
Hey, Holly. I think Norm missing.
Like the Jews do it.
I think that's part of the conversation. Like, we're not putting disparaging terms toward Jews. We're just trying to understand where the terms come from. Like, I just want you to be clear that there's not no attack on Jews or the Jewish people at all.
Well,
that was never the purpose of the conversation.
Maybe something that you didn't realize was a little bit of the Catholics. So everybody in this room has a credit card, right? Does anybody say that? Did you get it from a Jewish guy? And why would you think of Jews as like being some kind of weird thing if everybody here has a car loan and a mortgage and a credit card? Like, where do Jews fit into all of this?
No, that's not what we're saying. That was not the point of the conversation.
What did you say, Steve? I didn't hear what you said.
I said I thought we just heard from you that the term came from the Catholics.
Well, the Catholics basically were saying they forbade Christians from engaging in lending money. So, Norm, I think what we're saying is whether it's the trope, we're talking about right now, whether the stereotype is true or not, I don't know. I'm just saying, if it is true, and maybe it's not, maybe this is a totally waste of time, but if there is some representation of, let's say, CPAs, okay, and a lot of CPAs have reduced, but if there is an overrepresentation there,
well, that seems like a good profession. Everybody makes
it is. There's nothing.
Taxes.
There's nothing.
And the same thing. Anchor.
Do you know? We just agreed not a single one of us have ever been a Jewish banker.
We didn't say that, but I'm just saying we didn't say that we knew a Jewish bank. We just said that a banker. We just said a banker is not a bad thing. And earlier, if you missed the conversation, we also talked about black people being called thugs. You know what I'm saying? Which is
I would never do.
I'm saying, but it is fair if you point out the thugs. There are thugs as black people. Same where there are Jew bankers.
Yeah, and you can name precisely zero, right?
No, I mean, if I Google it, I can easily find a Jewish banker.
But you bring something to the conversation that you've never encountered in your life. It's just a stereotype you heard somewhere.
I haven't met bankers in my life. No, that's
Really?
the problem.
You've never been to a bank? You've never been to a bank in your life?
Hey, Norm, you're making it argumentative when it's really not. Like, you would have to be here at the beginning to know that.
I'm hoping you're going to dig down to having your pre-existing notions. You literally never met a Jew. You've been to a bank thousands of times in your life, and you never met a Jewish banker. And yet people are comfortable saying that. You have credit cards and car loans and mortgages, but you never use the term usury. But then you go back to the Middle Ages and talk about, Jews were usurers.
That's my boy Norm, laying out the truth of the earth now.
That's not what we were saying, Norm. That's not what we're saying.
That's what you saying now.
5 minutes ago.
That's what's exactly what you saying. Don't fuck around up in here with Norm.
So you think the stereotype is totally bogus? Like, forget the professions for a minute. Financial acumen. Sorry. Do you think that Jews again? We're talking about representation.
People get shitty mics.
Do you think that Jewish families have a better financial acumen than other groups in their household?
I think probably the richest class of people in this country are WASPs.
Hey, Norm, let me get these. Holly, let me get these names real quick. Lloyd Blankfein, Jamie DeMond,
Okay.
Here we go. Here we go. No. Let me finish now.
Just to prove a point, but not to disparage.
So you'd never heard of these people before in your life, and you Googled Jewish bankers, and so now, well, the richest people are the Larry Finks and the other Jewish people who own the industry. So what are we talking about?
Hey, Holly and Dr. Jordan, I'm going to back out this conversation because it's definitely going. Holly, and Dr. Jordan know that this conversation is not going where we intended. It was never anti-Semitic foundation at all.
I never used that word. I just
okay. It wasn't even argumentative. We was actually trying to build something. I mean, but I see where it's going, and be respecting this room. I won't let it go there. And by me respecting you, Norm, and other people that's from this room, especially Dr. Jordan and Bryn, and even Steve and Roya, that's never my intention. It was never to disparage Jewish people. We were talking about black people, white people. We were talking about groups of people and their stereotypes. And that's all we were talking about. Never to pin anything on anyone. We were actually saying that the majority of black people aren't thugs. The majority of Jews aren't bankers. That's what we were saying.
So I'm the one who put the title up there. So I'll take some credit for that. And the point was really just to talk about how sometimes the stereotypes are distorted or pejorated, is a word, in a way that takes some element of truth and turns it into a negative, because this room was initially, when I came in, about conspiracies, and so he came in, I were talking about conspiracy theories, and we were talking about flat Earth originally, and so my question was, well, where do some of these stories or stereotypes come from? Well, maybe there's an element of truth in certain respects, but over generations of time, things get distorted in amazing ways, and then they get weaponized. So that's really what it is. And I've been kind of working in the background here, so I haven't been following this carefully. But yeah, it wasn't intended to be. It was really a general conversation about the Earth being flat and propaganda versus conspiracy, and how those play off each other.
And honestly, like, there was only 2 people on the stage, Norma. It was me and Dr. Jordan, and we was trying to just spark the room back up by having a conversation. It had no intention, never anything about the Jews in particular. We talk about different races and different things like that. So I'm not trying to make the point that Jews are bad people. slurs or usury and any of that. That was never my intention or anyone else's intention. We were just talking about stereotypes.
I appreciate it.
I just wanted to make sure we
Thank
stop.
you for saying that.
We're also not flat earth.
I did make that point though, because the Torah does describe a flat earth with a firmament over it. It does not describe
The Torah says flat earth.
It describes something with a firmament over it. It describes the face of the earth, God hovering over the face, and the waters above and the waters below separated by the firmament. It does not imply it implies more of a flat earth than it does a globe, 100%.
That's not the correct reading of that.
Okay, I get the Hebrew could give a different interpretation, but I only can speak on English, but I would love to hear the clarity of what the Hebrew text would say about those words. No more, because I really don't know, but I would love to. I mean, that's
There was stereotypes, though. There was stereotypes. So.
But Hakima, you don't actually believe in the flat Earth, do you?
Oh God, please, for the
To answer your question, I believe what I see, and my eyes tell me that we are on a stationary plane that's not spinning 1,000 miles per hour or rotating 1,000 miles per hour while spinning around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour while chasing the sun upwards through the universe at 400,000 miles per hour. No, my senses don't tell me that. My senses tell me that we're on a flat plane. But I could be wrong, but just based on my senses, I tell you.
Chris was trying to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Can I go off the first?
Yeah.
Let Chris go. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share something, but it's a quick story before I share it. It's my brother a long time ago. He kept saying in front of me, if your dad is a doctor, you become a doctor. If your mom is a lawyer, you become a lawyer. Or if they are both lawyers, you become a lawyer. And I never criticized a stupid question or something I don't know. Even though it sounds stupid, but I just learned to not make comments about something I don't know. So since I really don't know what he meant, I was like, okay, I really want to find out why he's saying that. What made him put that up? And start reading, searching, and there's the links that I can actually provide you with. Most of them online. It was something that they really didn't research until late, a few years ago, called genetic memory. So reading about genetic memory, they said certain mouses they don't get close to certain smell. Once they're born, they immediately know that smell is not right thing to do. They don't get close to that smell, so they run away. And they were trying to figure out how would the mouse know? I mean, she never smelled that, or she never got close to it. Why she's running away immediately? So they figured that actually the mouse could transfer certain things through the DNA or through the genetically to their kids. So after that, I kept reading, and I'm linking that to the first answer, Norm, and I think that's the most accurate answer about the Jew. So they said some type of trauma or situations, like a scary situation, or not only scary situations, like other things that could actually automatically, without us only, transfer that to our kids, and our kids without
That's called
knowing.
epigenetics.
Epigenetic, exactly. So with the Jew, I'm not sure 100% because they're still studying that. They are, we all know they are organized. They are managing with money. They are really good with managing money and properties and stuff like that. And when I kept reading, one time I was searching if that's true, I actually found a link I could actually put in the chat. It says people who face genocide, like back in the day, along thousands of years ago, whatever, their kids, they are noticing that on their kids after hundreds of years or tens of years, their kids actually do have that fear. Like they do collect money, collect gold or stuff like that. So that could be the reason for the first topic you guys were talking about. That's all. Thank you, Holly. Thank you. I can see you guys.
Thanks, Chris.
I want to say real quick, sorry. I don't believe in the whole trauma changes the DNA thing. I think it's a bit woo-woo. I do believe that trauma, it has an effect on the way that our body reads DNA. So there is a connection, but I don't buy the whole inherited trauma thing. Now, I do buy that when you're pregnant, let's say you're beaten, or the people who were experiencing 9/11, for example.
Michelle, why are you in my room? You were just in this room.
That the baby inside of their belly was affected by the mother's stress level, the cortisol levels, and there may be some effect on the baby that could last, So I think there's something to that, but as far as the body keeps the score, I don't buy it. That's just my personal.
Well, that whole science, which is a science, was demonstrated by Holocaust survivors. So, there's plenty of empirical data to support that. Anyways, I'm going back to work here, but go ahead.
I was going to say the studies on Holocaust survivors are actually pretty interesting. I think that there's something to be said about the length generationally of which that translates, right? Where you get into the nuance of that science is when people want to assert that DNA is changed permanently down the tree, and you go, hey, due to slavery trauma 200 years ago, due to this trauma 500 years ago, it transfers, it starts to lose, the empirical data doesn't add up, and they start to lose credibility the further back you go. But if you take somebody who was in a refugee camp, or somebody who was a Holocaust survivor, and my great-grandmother was part of some of these studies that they did, and you go down their generational line with the DNA, 2-3 generations down, they stop seeing what they see with the kids and the grandkids, right? Once you get to the great-grandkids, they stop seeing that degradation of the DNA and the way that they're looking at the genetic coding. So I believe that there's something to be said in the biological kind of adaptation that we do, but this concept that 10 generations down the line, your descendants are going to be directly impacted by the trauma of your life today, I don't think science spells that out.
Well, the stress hormones are altered, but is that the same thing as DNA? The stress hormones? I think that's not getting...
That's cortisol.
Yeah, so that's where I'm like, okay.
Your hormonal compilation is very different than how genetic expression shows up.
Hey, Brain, I'm glad you're here because this room was almost going sideways. They were trying to make us seem like we was talking some anti-Semitic talk.
Yeah, you bringing up a bunch of anti-Semitic shit, Akima.
Stereotypes from the black community, white community, Jewish community. Actually, me and Dr. Jordan was trying to spark the room back up. We were only two.
Spark it, nigga.
Yeah, I'm working, but I'm the one who changed the title. Yeah, we went from conspiracy to kind of talking about how there's some truth in some stereotypes, but that's how they become tropes. They become weaponized. They become distorted and corrupted over time. And this is true in,
bang, British, you bang like Jeremy Diamond. Nigga, pull up
thinking about spirits and, some kind of some even religious entities, deities. That's just the storytelling nature of who we are. We're conditional learners.
I think, Dr. Jordan, we all know each other by now. I don't think any of us will disrespect others. When you guys talk about I took it with a good faith. I understood 100% what you guys were talking about. I think maybe Steve and everybody else will.
You were very
All it is communication.
I know that we wasn't targeting. We was not trying to go nowhere near despair to the Jewish people. Like nowhere near that.
People get hypersensitive, and people have certain opinions. Like, if you had said that to me or somebody, and I'm sure I have fucking 31 unlistened to voice notes. I'm sure somebody's complained. I don't know why I become the complaint network, but I do. But when I look at a stage and I see
It's because you're a bitch, and people hate your bullshit,
that the room was
That's
not
why people
engaging in
complain to you, because
anti-Semitic
you suck,
rhetoric, right?
man.
Like, if certain Jews are present, it's very unlikely that is what's actually happening. Now, Dr. Jordan will placate some people and be kind and make some space, but
I will not, because I'm a fucking horrific, nasty faggot.
Like, just not to say the rest of you would, but those types of things.
I'm a fat, overweight federal judge, cocksuck, dick lick.
Members of our community are here because I know damn well that they wouldn't be tolerating it. So don't worry.
People shouldn't tolerate you fake ass judge. Fat.
People who any conversation about black people is racism. Any conversation about Jews is anti-Semitic. Any conversation about gays is homophobic. And you know, I get sensitivities, and I get sensitivities to tropes and stereotypes. People are super sensitive, and I get it because they endanger communities sometimes. But yeah, I wouldn't have believed that was what the room was doing, anyways.
Okay, I do want to just read this to you guys because I think this is good. All right, so this is from the Arkansas Advocate, which is random, but anyway, these Dutch famine during World War II and Holocaust survivors. Those studies that we're talking about. These studies found that traumatic experiences like stress, famine, and war can influence the.
All right, everybody. This is the room you'll be watching tonight. I am headed back to the bar to get my fucking credit card because I left that shit at the bar. You'll be listening to Holly, Hakima, Dr. Steve, and Bren. And there's a lot of people in the audience. Enjoy.
However, these changes are not definitive, but rather adaptable. So that's why I'm like, I think this gets conflated a lot, like the gene expression, the way the body reacts to the DNA, but it doesn't.
The gene expression.
I still think it's pretty woo-woo. The body keeps a score, which is
perfect.
For
Let's make it so well.
And everybody's adopted this into our whole lives, like all these.
Oh, sorry.
Mental health experts, especially the ones that work with children, they're all totally into this, and I actually believe that it's problematic. I really do. I think it's actually creating more trauma
hop in your car.
In there, in
hop
children.
in your car and
well, the thing with
you'll be home by midnight.
Right, is that, and it's all about terminology we're using. If the genes that are expressed are impacted by trauma, right, that is shifting the final, how do I want to word this? That shifts the final genotype, I mean. Right, it ends up with that, so it's kind of a both and, right? Like, it's not like the DNA is magically replaced with different DNA or damaged and encoded in a way that can't ever shift, but genetic expression shifts the predisposition of the next generational occurrence.
Yeah.
And so if,
Good,
my grandma Verna was a Holocaust survivor,
spend the night.
and then she had kids, any genetic expressive variant is going to show up in her kids. And then that's going to move the starting point of that family line's gene. Wow, my brain is not working. It's the end of a long day. Basically, you move the starting point, right? The things that have now been expressed are the standard, and then you move from there. And so you have kind of moved the goalpost.
They gotta work tomorrow. Good, skip it.
In somebody's genetic diversity in their overlay by the third
Good,
generation,
skip
which
it.
is also why, if you look at those studies, like I said, by the time you get past that third generation, the shift, if you don't continue to add trauma, has the ability to kind of offset itself. but it might not, right? Like you've already gone off past
Really nice
2 or 3
night.
steps from where you were 2 generations ago, and genetic diversity could cause that expression to go back to what it was before, but it might leave you those 2 or 3 steps over
Oh, just text me.
into the future generations. So do I think it has a lasting impact on your bloodline? I think it has some level of genetic variance. But the trauma bonding piece that we have socially turned this into, I don't think it does that level of harm. I still haven't seen the study that says that several generations down you're still suffering from that initial trauma, unless the later generations have their own major trauma that pushes that in that regard on things. And we see this in terms of genetic reactions to pain response, to stress. What you find in these studies is that the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors tend to have high pain tolerance. They tend to have low stress indication, aka it takes a lot more to stress their body into things like forced dehydration, and those are very likely adaptive genetic traits that have popped up, because it doesn't take 3 million years to shift what things are put out, right? If everybody in this room was stranded in a desert, within a couple generations the pigmentation of the kids would adjust, their temperament to the temperature of the climate would adjust. It's kind of like when you move from one area to another, within a year or two you're used to their heat, you're used to their humidity, you're used to those things. Our bodies make these adjustments, and they make these adjustments that then become indicative in our offspring. So I think there's probably a 25-30% scientific backup for the overall claim. I just think that we have socially stretched it to a level that makes it woo-woo.
That question was in my head a long time ago. Like I said earlier, I don't know if you heard me, but it was my brother who's asking that question. Oh, he was always saying that. Oh, if your dad is a doctor, you're going to become a doctor, Yeah, it sounded stupid, but I kept studying, asking, reading about it, searching. And one time I was giving a link to a study. I don't know if I have it. I need to search. I need to look for that link. That link, they did a study on a kid. His dad was I think a piano, I don't remember exactly what it was, but a piano player or a guitar player, something like that. And he was very talented. He used to play guitar or piano with talent. And he died, and his son never met him. And the son didn't come out playing guitar really nice. No. He was trained on playing the same whatever piano or the guitar is the same as his dad. And he was able to learn very quick, better than the other students were there. So they were shocked. How that even possible? Well, as we know, we translate what's in our mind into the guitar or the piano. We're moving our hand faster, or we hear the tone and we kind of hit another one to make it sound better. That's basically what's happening in our brain. We translate it through our hand. Well, it sounds like this kid, something in his brain was transferred from his dad to him without even him seeing his dad in real life.
There's a difference. There's a difference here, right? When we're having the conversation about Holocaust survivor genetic expression and what people then push to the alteration of the DNA, which I think is just an inaccurate phrasing, and genetic predispositions that people have, right? Like you can have a genetic predisposition to heart problems in the same way that you can have a genetic predisposition to phenomenal hearing, right? You can have a genetic predisposition to increase dexterity or increase flexibility, and those things tend to lead down that pathway, right? If you have really good hearing and you can hear the separation of tones, you're not going to be tone deaf, and that's going to open the door for you to have a musical inclination that somebody who's tone deaf isn't going to have. And some of that comes from the genetic kind of predetermined pool of what you can pull from. And it's funny because we accept.
Hey,
Hey, Bonnie, how are you doing?
not too bad.
Good. Yes, sorry I missed your call. I was listening to something and I couldn't exit it for some reason.
That was weird. It's like, call me. I call when you're like, not feeling.
How was your day?
Good. That's good.
Good.
So you don't live here?
No, I live in Chicago.
Okay. So why your number is California? You're in Kansas City. You don't live in Chicago.
You are so smart and observant and beautiful.
Thank you. So what's happening there?
Nothing. I'm kind of tired. I'm gonna actually have to go walk back to the restaurant we were at. I left my card at the bar, so I'm just getting ready to head back over there.
Okay. Yeah, you should told me earlier. It's 10, I can't go to work.
Yeah, sorry. I know it's late.
Where did you go?
We went to this place called Extra Virgin.
Okay.
It's tapas.
That's an extra version.
It was good. It's very good food.
That's good.
Yeah. So where are you from? Esfahan?
No.
Tehran?
No.
I don't know any other cities in Iran.
Flash.
No, I don't know that one.
It's right next to like Caspian Sea in the north.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How did you end up in Kansas City?
I know. Oh my god. So, I won the green card lottery. I only signed up for it once, and I didn't know it's the real thing.
So
And I won.
you're a millionaire.
No, it's a green card.
No, I mean it's 1 in a million that you get it.
I know, but it's not money.
Yeah, I mean, but that's cool. I mean, I wish I could have met you tonight. It would have been fun.
What?
I said I wish I could have met you tonight. It would have been a lot of fun.
I have a lot of fun. But yeah. That's, yeah, I didn't know anyone here, so I knew this Iranian couple who lived here. I called them. I'm like, you know what? You guys can help me out. And I ended up here, and then I ended up going to school here, and I ended up working here. And I keep looking for jobs somewhere else, like something decent, and the job market is awful. I'm like, I guess I'm gonna stay.
Yeah.
Damn it, Edmund.
What kind of work do you do?
I'm a financial analyst for a manufacturing company.
Oh, wow.
What's that noise?
Oh, my friend was trying to ping me on this chat app.
Oh, okay.
So, well, دلم برات خیلی تنگ شده.
No, that's not true. You don't even know me to like miss me.
It's a nice expression, though. I feel like you could say it to anybody, and it would still, mean something.
Man, yeah, I'm impressed you remembered the whole thing.
Yeah, I like Rumi. Do you know the poet Rumi?
Do I know?
Or you like his great 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 granddaughter or something?
No, but I know Rumi. You know Rumi?
Oh yeah, I've got many Rumi books.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. You know too much about it on that.
Yeah, I love Iranian people. I love Iranian women. I love the food. They're so well educated, good families, nice people. I like the way you sound.
Iranian women. Okay.
Yeah, Persian women are some of the most beautiful women in the world.
That's what they're saying. Thank you. I'll miss you. If I'm one of them.
I don't know. How tall are you? You're 5'4". You're kind of short.
That was mean, though. I'm cutely short.
Yeah, I agree. You are.
I can wear heels with anyone.
Oh, that's true. You can get up to 5'7" easily.
7? That's it, no.
What are you wearing? 4-inch heels? 5-inch heels?
Yeah, I like heels.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Tough on your feet, though.
That's pretty, though.
Yeah.
So, are you here for work?
Yeah, I'm here till tomorrow. I leave tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Why do you live in Chicago, though?
Why do I live there?
Uh-huh.
I own an apartment building, and I have a job downtown, so I'm kind of stuck there.
When did you move there?
I was born there. I've been living there.
Oh, I thought you said California, though.
No, I used to live in LA. I lived there from 2010 to 2015.
Okay. I thought you moved from there to Chicago.
No.
Chicago's cute.
Yeah, Chicago's great. You should come this summer and we'll go sailing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you don't like swimming?
I do.
But you're afraid to go sailing?
No.
I mean, we're not going to go out into the lake. We're just going to go to the tie-up area and close downtown.
Let's see.
Yeah, let me know. I mean, it'll be fun.
I mean, yeah, summer.
Yeah. Do you ever go back to Iran?
I've been back once.
Do you miss it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot. I miss my city the most.
Did you leave just because of the green card, or did you like break up with a boyfriend or dump your boyfriend when you moved here, or what happened?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. I bet you it's an accurate question.
No, what's a green card?
Did you go to school? Where'd you go to college?
So I got a bachelor in Iran, and then a master's, and then I got another master's here.
Oh, wow.
UMKC.
Oh, wow. You're a smart girl then.
I kind of had to do this one here. But I'm not like sad about doing it, but it's expensive here.
Yeah. You got to make money if you want to live well.
No, I meant schools.
Oh, you mean you took out loans for the masters?
Uh, it's not the worst amount of student loan, but still, it doesn't even make sense. Why do we need to pay that much for school? Like, it doesn't make sense.
I know. It's one of those bullshit things where it's a business, and if you don't pay, like, you might not have the chance of getting like a high-paying job or something.
True. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little too much.
So, how's your dating life? How's your love life in Kansas City? I mean, where do you live? Overland Park?
Oh my god, it's like close to Love Park.
Is it like, do you meet guys, or is it, you can't find somebody that you like?
Well, people like get married here like super early, like really young, right?
Here in America?
No, Midwest, I guess.
I don't think so. I think the average age for marriage is like 27, 28.
No, dude, like by 28, everyone has like 2 kids.
Yeah. I
I don't know, that's what I'm saying at work.
I think it's a good idea to have kids in your 20s.
Um,
The problem is, it's like we're so materialistic and like going after college and jobs, and it's like we need to slow it down and worry about that stuff. I don't know. Maybe everything's perfect.
yeah, that's true too. What I think people get married pretty young here, but
What about in Iran? Don't they get even married there even younger?
um, see what you're talking about is a really small percentage in like small towns or something. But in general, no, they get married older. That might be because like I don't know, life is like so much more expensive and harder to start a life. But no, but that got married like pretty late.
Well, I guess, are you happy?
Oh, yeah, you because of the boyfriend thing.
No, meaning that like marriage and kids and jobs and money and all this shit. It's like if you're happy,
I
it's
don't,
like it's more
I don't
important.
care about being in a relationship or being married. Like that's not a value to me itself if it's not a good relationship.
Right, of course, yeah. Then it's just
But it is to a
detriment.
lot of people because they get pressured by society or their like family.
Yeah. I mean, when you're young, you don't really have like a basis of comparison. It's like, oh, this is a new relationship. This is a great relationship. It's like, oh, everybody's getting married. Oh, I want to get married too.
Yeah, doesn't that sound childish though?
Yeah, but like you are a child, even in your mid-20s.
Exactly. But it can be a little different for guys, but for girls, when I see like they even get pregnant really fast, and I'm sorry, but they fuck up their life because they don't get anywhere. Like a lot of them don't get anywhere. I'm like, why would you like sacrifice your whole life just to have a child that young?
Well, they don't know any better. But sometimes I think it works out and they're happy.
I mean, they don't like at 20, like 20. I don't know. They don't become a professional person. I don't think so. If this is judgmental, like this is not my business.
Yeah,
I should do it.
that's true. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's too bad I didn't get to meet you. I would like to have met you.
Yeah. You had time. You thought about it too late.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
That's your loss. Oh. So hope we have a good night. If she's drunk, you shouldn't drive. Are you drunk?
No, I didn't drive. I'm just a couple blocks away from the restaurant.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go walk over there.
Okay.
All right, Bonnie. Well, I'll save your number. Let's chat. I mean, and if you do want to come to Chicago, I'd love to pick you up at O'Hare and host you for a weekend or a week if you want to see what Chicago's like.
Oh, thank you. That's sweet.
All right. Well, sweet dreams, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, then. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Oh, God. Here we go.
Conference calls recently.
The Million Marathon. Everybody's on Chatter. Chatter's taking over.
Back a little bit, Nelson. I was like, okay, this is something that's put together for anybody that, wants to be in any type of social audio.
This nigger's logo's got 3 5 teal circles. That's it.
Business.
That's the whole logo.
Instead of just banging the.
Well, it looks like they're already good. Well, while you're doing your thing, Bren, I thought for sure when they were talking about stereotypes, they were going to bring up horse jockeys. I mean, those guys generally are short and weigh like 130 pounds. And I don't know if that has anything to do with genetics. It's just when talking about sports. I mean, you don't get 6'1", 220-pound jockeys riding a horse at Hollywood Park.
Right. I mean, that is true. You end up in those situations where certain genetic traits are desirable. In the NFL, you want large-bodied men. In the NBA, you want tall men. You don't want an NBA player on a horse if you're hiring a jockey.
Exactly.
Sorry if I'm a little quiet. I'm just getting everybody pinged in, making sure everybody gets back.
No worries.
Isn't it kind of interesting when it's okay to want certain attributes, characteristics for a particular kind of industry like you just described, but it's not okay for others? I don't know. It just got me thinking about that.
Yeah, well, as Bren said earlier, some people are more triggered about certain things than others are. So, it's as long as you try and handle it relatively respectfully. And by the way, Akima, I don't think you did anything wrong in the other room. I thought when it even came close to the mark, and it certainly didn't cross over, you gave everybody like 3 warnings. So, Akima, I thought you did fine. Just my opinion.
But I was talking about like industries compared to other industries, Steve. Like, it's okay to do that in basketball, for example, because you need that kind of a skill. Well, you need skill, right? But there's a certain body type that the recruiters would be attracted to, I would imagine. And then
yeah, go ahead, Ollie. Go ahead.
But then in the corporate environment, you couldn't do that, right? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. Like, it's just kind of interesting to me.
I was referring to 20, 30 minutes ago when I said Hakima did a great job. I wasn't talking about 5'10".
Yeah, it's interesting. I wasn't here, Hakima, for that, so I can't comment on that. But Holly, it is funny, right? And it really depends. And one of my favorite examples is Hooters, right? Nobody is, other than particular feminists, most Americans are not throwing a tantrum that the Hooters uniform is this little slutty, skanky uniform, and they hire people to fit that uniform, right? But if Applebee's tried to do it, there'd be an outrage. There's particular sectors where we're okay with certain types of quantifiers where you go, okay, this is acceptable and nobody's really mad about it. Versus things where we go, yeah, you can't do that. Like, no one cares. There's no giant movement of women out there going, hey, we want 300-pounders to be able to work at Hooters. There's not an empowerment movement of ladies going, fuck Hooters, they can't discriminate. If anything, there's women going, that uniform's a little bit much, but not trying to put a 300-pound woman in that uniform. We accept certain things in certain circumstances, and it's all social norms, right? If that Hooter position was a C-suite job making $150K a year, would be 100% different, right? If that was a super desirable position, it'd be 100% different. You'd have 300-pound people suing for the discrimination of that thing. But because it's not that desirable, nobody really cares. And we socially go, that's fine.
Hey, Brent, I'm trying to get a mic check. Do you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just had to power my phone off again. I was talking a minute ago, but okay, as long as you guys hear me.
Yeah,
It's not really because of the desirability of the position. I mean, basketball players in the NBA get paid so much. It's a very desirable position, and yet most of them really have to be extremely tall, like way taller than the general population, and strong and all of that, and have the particular skills. But that's because that's a material need for that position. That's what the role is all about. Just like in Hooters, the role is all about how you look and fitting into a particular type of attractiveness. So I don't know. I don't know that it would make a difference if Hooters was extremely well paid.
But the reason, I'm sorry. The reason why, though, right, is the social normative is we as a society, especially in the West, are fine with athletics, especially high-end professional athletics, being for the elite athletes. We're fine with that. Nobody's offended by that, right? Nobody's trying to put racial quotas on a basketball team. No one's trying to put racial quotas on a football team. We understand that there's going to be a disproportionate number of black men in the NFL and in the NBA. And nobody's trying to augment that, right? Because we accept this is a place where we are fine with the material requirements of the job being put forward and saying, okay, this is cool. There's a lot of industries where that's not the case, where you do have DEI and you do have social programs that are trying to augment people who don't have, the desirable skill set or aren't from the most desirable demographic in terms of, different precursors. But we're fine with it in pro sports. And the reason why I brought up Hooters is because if any other restaurant chain tried to hire their serving staff as models who serve, they'd be getting sued in a fucking minute and they'd be screwed. But we accept it in places like Hooters, right? Because the social normative says, that's fine over there. We don't care. So I think part of it is, yes, like you're saying, those are the desired skill qualifications for the job. However, we don't accept that in every industry. We accept that in certain places where we decide that's acceptable. And the reason why I said like financial or desirability makes a difference is because if Hooters waitresses suddenly started making $150,000, $200,000 a year, you would have discrimination cases, because every other industry where that is the case and there's any sort of leaning towards a particular type of hire, you see those things pop up. So what I'm saying is it's very clear that because that Hooters server is not in a job that most women want, you don't have this stink being raised that would be raised if that was a desirable position.
And Bren, do I presume that when you talk about Hooters and you say there would be discrimination cases, does that mean they're part of a protected class? And if so, what is the protected class?
Well, so what you end up having happen, right, and this is the thing, is it doesn't usually end up being a protected class argument. It's a discrimination against immutable characteristics. And what people will argue is, because I am naturally heavy, I have been excluded because you have a weight standard. And that is something I cannot control, that is not essential to the actual role you hired me for, which is why Hooters, and the Hooters, had attorneys finagle this and it's worked well for them. Hooters and restaurants like Hooters, they hire their staff as models who blank, models who serve, models who host, models who, whatever title they need to do to fit it into that particular state's employment law, they do. Like in California, if you work at a Hooters, you are a model who serves. And so because you're a model, they are able to hire you based on looks, weight, height, and they're able to restrict employment based on looks, weight, and height because you are a model. Part of your job description is modeling, right? They are modeling those uniforms when they bring you those chicken wings. Now, we can laugh at that and know that that's a nice little loophole of legalese that's been used, but they're able to do that. If an Applebee's manager walked up and said, hey, Jenny, you need to lose 20 pounds. Here at Applebee's, we don't have fat women. He'd be sued and fucked, right? And if an Applebee's said, I'm not hiring you because here we only hire women who are under 5'6" and under 120 pounds or whatever number you want to put out, you would have a discrimination clause on immutable characteristics, not a class of discrimination.
Bren, I'm curious, would you be able to, it makes me wonder about certain jobs that are customer facing, like sales and things like that. Is the only, if attractive people presumably do better, is it possible, if someone's, is the only way to, for example, fire someone is purely based on performance and strong, basically hard evidence, as opposed to just a sense that maybe the customers wouldn't like them as much due to their appearance?
Bren, I can take a stab at that, and you can tell me where I
go ahead,
up.
Steve.
My understanding is that hiring and firing, as long as you're not violating someone's civil rights, and what that means is you're not determining your hiring or firing based on a protected class, age, sex, religion, skin tone, disability, whistleblower, and there's one or two others. Now, if you file a discrimination claim, if you've been working for someone for a gazillion years, and then you say, well, they fired me because of my religion, it's your burden of proof to prove that. So as long as they're not hiring or firing you based on one of the 7 protected classes, then they are not discriminating against you. But I'll defer to Bren because he knows a lot more about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basics of it. Now, you can, as I said, people will make the immutable characteristics argument in certain individual cases where the weight was brought up or the size was brought up or, the general attractiveness level was brought up. There was a case in California several years ago where a man won against Chili's, which Chili's is a restaurant here. I don't know if Chili's is national or not or who it's owned by. But he was fired because he smelled, right? He was not bathing enough and he had an odor. And they fired him for it and had apparently discussed it with him one time. And then the manager, took it as this is a forward-facing problem. Customers are complaining. This is unpleasant. Well, the man has a glandular health condition that the employer didn't know about, that he was under no obligation to say anything about. But because they fired him for something that was directly related to a medical condition, he won the lawsuit and they lost a fuck ton of money for wrongful termination because they fired him for something directly related to a health condition. And in this state, that particular court looked at it and said, this is an illegal termination. You can't fire him for this. And so there's very interesting segues where things that we would look at and say, okay, if this guy's coming to work and he's stinking it would be reasonable for a manager to go, I can't have a stinky server out there stinking up the restaurant and making people uncomfortable. But you can't just fire somebody for that, because there are circumstances where, like in this instance, you know, while the employer can't ask him about his health, you know, you can't mandate that, because they didn't bother to have the conversation that could have led to a reasonable accommodation, and they fired him for something that is outside of his control due to health, they got fucked in court. So there's space in between these things.
And very quickly, although it's not an employer situation, there are a lot of airlines that have, none of us read them as passengers, but there are conditions for getting onto an airline. And one of them is that you have to have good hygiene, i.e. not stink like a stink pot. And you can be refused entrance to an airline because you smell.
That's so interesting. One of the things that sometimes has come to my mind is the idea of conflicting accommodations and what the heck you would do about that. So, for example, a stinky person due to some medical condition, but then another person who has like a hyper, like if they're autistic and they have hyper smell or sense of smell and are really bothered by that sort of thing. Or if you have someone who needs their dog for emotional support and then someone else who's extremely allergic to dogs. Like, how are employers expected to juggle conflicting accommodations?
Well, there are certain things that you're allowed to ask and certain things you're not allowed to ask during a job interview. For example, I'm not allowed to ask you what your medical condition is. Are you suffering from any types of medical conditions? And there are other things. But I can say, do you have anything going on in your life that prohibits you from performing all the functions of this job? And then, of course, if you lie about it, like for example, if let's say you have a neuromuscular disease and you can't lift above 10 pounds, and then and the job requires you to lift 50, and you say yes, you know, I can later fire you for lying on your job application.
Yeah, so that's definitely true. And most employers who do a good job of hiring, which I would say is a small percentage, frankly, but that do a good job of screening, they'll ask those questions. And a lot of major corporations will have it in their training book for their store managers, their location managers. Like, for instance, in Starbucks, in their onboarding packages, they will ask, is there any sort of issue that you may have with meeting our hygiene and grooming standards? And that opens the door so that if you ever don't meet those standards, when you got hired, you didn't tell them there was something that prevented you from doing that. And here's an example. If you go to certain parts of New York and you go to certain parts of Pennsylvania where there's heavy Orthodox Jewish communities, you'll have men with beards.
I was just going to bring that up, Brent. Brent, I was just going to say that you are absolutely not allowed to ask what religion you are, but you can say part of this job, your shift is from Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown. Is there anything that prevents you from working that shift?
Yeah, and in the hiring process, it's the vetting process. And so in a hiring process, you can ask questions, you know, and if you said, hey, are you available to work every shift on every day? Are you available to work after sundown on every day? You can ask those questions. Now, they might be very clearly leading in certain communities to say, oh, they don't want to hire Jews. So they're asking, you know, are you able to do it? And if you can't, they don't have to hire you. That's perfectly fine. Once you've been hired, they're in hot water if they try to mandate things, because then they're under legal obligation for a different level of reasonable or religious accommodation. And so it's kind of like that hiring interview is their time to vet out these things. because once you are an employee, all of a sudden you have different protections, and the restrictions are very different for them. The beard one is a good example because Starbucks, has in their packages very clearly, do you have, the inability, or is there going to be a problem with you keeping the grooming standards? And the grooming standards are spelled out quite clearly to have a maintained set of facial hair, a beard not over a certain length, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of that is because in certain areas they have been sued for managers trying to say, hey, that beard is unkept, that is not maintained, and somebody saying, well, fuck off. This beard is part of my religion. I don't have to maintain this beard. And so a lot of the questions that are asked in interviews that sometimes seem pointless have to do with screening those things, because once you're employed, it's a lot harder for them to restrict some of those things.
I don't think you're allowed to ask, what is your marital status? You might not even be able to ask about children, but I absolutely can ask, when you're not, is there anything in your personal life that will prevent you from coming to work on time, working uninterrupted, and not getting text messages and phone calls during your time on the clock? That I can.
So the loophole that companies use, and I used to find this to be really interesting, is they're allowed to share information with you. And if in that you give them information back, they're not asking a direct question. So they can't ask you if they're married, but they can say, hey, here at Starbucks Corporation, we offer health insurance for children and spouses and people. Is this something that would be beneficial to you? And people will go, oh yeah, I can have my husband, I can have my kids, I can have there's ways to maneuver with that question where you didn't ask them about whether or not they had kids. You asked them if they had someone who would benefit from the health insurance. And so a lot of companies do that end run around asking if you're married or asking if you have kids, if it's a benefited position, is they'll just ask you if there's anyone who would benefit from those benefit packages they offer, and that's a perfectly legal end run. So a lot of these questions get answered without being asked.
And then, of course, if you, I'll say really quickly, then, of course, if you have 500 employees, none of them have kids, someone has a better chance of making an argument that you're discriminating because you never have hired a single person who has.
Yeah, it's why most major corporations will hire a token of fucking every race, every color, everything somewhere so that they can cover their ass. It's the same reason as, about 10 years ago, the University of California system was being sued by a black man who felt that he was being passed up for a vice chancellor position. And he had a pretty solid case. And while they were going to court, the UC system hired 6 black vice chancellors of the level of the position, and they hired 4 women and 2 men. So by the time he went to court, they were able to say, well, this is not a valid claim. We have 6 of them out of 24, so they're overrepresented. And his attorney had to go, well, it wasn't at the time. And the UC system had to go, well, it is now. And we never had a policy against it. And so his assertable harm turned into, well, if they were fine with hiring these 6, then clearly they didn't hire you, they didn't promote you because of other meritable things. Those types of things happen as well, where companies will preemptively hire enough so that you can't. And in the same way as there are people who will go, and whether it's Jewish, gay, or black, they'll go and get hired in an industry or at a business that doesn't have anybody like them, purposefully. And then they'll sue for discrimination or microaggression or any of the bullshit. So employment law, that's more of Steve's wheelhouse for years than mine. But I hate the concept of employment law and litigation because there's so much nuance to it. And there's so much subjectivity to, well, why were you fired, right? Were you fired because you're black? Or are you a black person who got fired? Because those are 2 different things.
So we were in a position down here where our team was 97% Latino, and we had HR come knocking. It was like, you guys need to hire a black person and you need to hire a white person for this team to diversify this team. And they're like, I was like, my director was like, we have to go to recruiting and only find a nice white one to add to the roster because there's too many Hispanic. And I was like, this is garbage, right? So all of the Latinos and blacks, we had to unofficially find reasons to get rid of them. I'm sorry, Latinos, we had unofficial reasons to get rid of them. And it was like, this is dumb, but it happens. People are playing politics, but HR is there to protect the enterprise. So if they're seeing the statistics be skewed, I guess that's what HR does.
Roger made a phenomenal point in the chat where Roger said, you oftentimes don't have to fire, you can manage people out. That's the other thing that is like, if most companies will drive somebody out of a job rather than fire them because they don't want they don't want to fuck with the unemployment claims, they don't want to fuck with certain issues, they don't want to risk being sued, so they'll just maneuver to where somebody no longer wants their job, as long as they don't get into, retaliation of a complaint or those type of territories. A lot of people just get pushed out, right? Like they get transferred to a department they don't like, their shifts become the shifts they don't want, whatever things that they kind of skimp on suddenly become the thing that the management is harping down on. Like there's definite ways to manage somebody out of their role to where they leave on their own versus actually terminating someone.
However, Bren, don't forget, we just had that United States Supreme Court case last week on that very same thing about that police officer who she was working in a department she loved. She was working plain clothes. They didn't reduce her pay. They just changed her department and her responsibilities, and she sued and won.
Yeah, and that's going to be, and we talked about this a little bit the other day, Steve, that's going to be a massive shift for how some of these court cases go, for how this is viewed legally, because, in her instance, there was simply this presumption of notoriety or prestige of the position she didn't get, that the position she did get didn't have. It wasn't a matter of pay, it wasn't a matter of benefits, it wasn't a matter of rank, but it was a matter of presumed mobility from the position she didn't get, an opportunity that the position she had apparently or allegedly doesn't have. And that's a whole new can of worms compared to standards that used to be acceptable, because now you're just going to be arguing prestige, notoriety, presumptive upward mobility, which is a weird one, because then it's like, okay, I guess you can argue, how many of the last 15 people who held that job moved up the ladder, how many of the last 15 people who held this job, but it creates this weird burden and gray area that it, makes me hate unemployment law even more, and glad that it's not something I have to deal with.
I've heard that there are people, maybe this is a myth, but I've heard that there are people that make a habit, almost like a hustle, of going in to interview just to try to catch them in something that they could be perceived as discriminatory so that they could sue.
Oh yeah, it's not a huge population, but there are people who, and it becomes public record, but there are people who will get hired at a job, or they'll interview. Usually they'll try to, it's more common that they'll try to get through the interview process, and then the minute they're hired, they're on the phone with OSHA complaining about safety. They're contacting the state or the county about discrimination policy violations. And then when the company finally gets sued, what they'll see is this person has sued 12 other employers in the last 8 years. And there's nothing that stops them from doing it, because if you are the employer violating the law, it doesn't matter that I have hunted down 7 or 8 employers who have violated the law in the past. Now, the court's going to look at me as one of these, job versions of an ambulance chaser, but the court's not going to really have an option, Because if the workplace is in fact violating regulations or laws in place, and there's an active, viable, assertable claim of discrimination, harm, or damages, then the court has to deal with that. It doesn't matter that Mr. Johnson has sued 8 of his last 8 employers. It's the same thing. It's similar to the people who get a job and within the first 6 weeks they fall or hurt themselves. And then they're out on workers' comp. And then they're out on workers' comp forever. And then eventually they go get another job. And within the first 6 weeks they fall off a ladder at that job. And now they're on workers' comp. There are people who work their way through the system, either suing employers or milking workers' comp disability from job to job to job to job to job. And as long as they paint within the lines, they can usually get away with it. It's kind of a pathetic existence, but there are people who do it.
Yeah, this is another. So the Lord is asking in the chat, like, how do people get pushed out of their jobs? And the way we do it at my company is like we essentially double your work and make timelines so aggressive that you're bound to fail, and then we knock you for lacking. You're not hitting your performance objectives, and then we document the paper trail. We get a little nice little pip, and the pip is your, like, if you don't get the hint that you're about to be out, if we're trying to push you out, is essentially what it is. And then you just make those pips impossible, so they're going to fail, and then you shut them out the door without us getting sued. So that's a short version of it.
And that happens every day in every major company across the country. It's also why, I tell people, understand the job role you're hired for, right? And what did they spell out the expectations of that job? What are the roles? What are the duties? And what you'll find is companies now paint these really broad duties for every position. Well, that's so that they can bury you in those things. And, sometimes it's so they can eliminate a role and make your role do 2 people's job, and they save, 1 person's worth of fucking payroll every year plus benefits. And other times it's because then they can overload people to where they choose to leave. And people will get the signal that, I've been here 7 years. I've never been written up in my life. And now all of a sudden Nicholas is coming down every week. And I'm getting written up for missing my quota, failed productivity, not keeping up with my workload. And I'm getting a write-up this Friday and next Friday and next Friday. Like, people see the writing on the wall, and they will usually just leave. Because if the company's doing it in the way that most of them do, you can't sue them for it. Like, it's very clear what they're doing, but they're allowed to do it. And so there's that gray area where they're navigating. Now, sometimes companies overstep and they fuck up, or they cross into, something that isn't legal, and somebody then has an assertable claim, and then they can sue. But every day people will find themselves kind of boxed in and pushed out of positions rather than being fired. Because if you fire someone, there's always a chance of wrongful termination.
The key is documentation. If you have a conversation with an employee, document it. Send them an email, hey, based on our conversation, yada, 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 yada. Usually the person will even reply to the email acknowledging, the conversation, which then now you've got 2-way communication that's documented. You can ask somebody, like, hey, can you get this to me by such and such time? And then if they don't, you could document with a reply saying, hey, I'd asked you to get this done by such and such time. Not sure if there was, a major impediment, but, can you get this done? And then if it doesn't get done, like, you just document. And then to Brendan's point, what people see the writing's on the wall, and they're like, shit, they want me out of here. Now, if you have a good leader and you do possess skill, you can have a conversation and walk yourself back from that plank. You just have to have a real coming Jesus moment of like, yeah, I had a bad attitude and it was because of this, or I'd been going through this thing, and 10-4, I know I'm making your job more difficult, having to manage me, and you can work through those things. If 2 things, the leader has to be confident in their ability to lead, and not just be some petty little bitch. And then the employee has to be accountable. And in those situations, you could salvage bad situations, even if I've been in situations where, I need this person gone. And then once they realize, oh shit, they're not fucking with me anymore. The old management used to let me get away with this shit. Now they're telling me that I have to do my job. Oh my God. And some people will suck it up and get it together. Most people won't. And usually what'll happen is they'll just say, okay, the fucking ride's over. And they just exit themselves. And they do it, and on their way out, they badmouth you that the reason that they left is because you're the dick and you're a micromanager and you're this or you're that. But the truth of the matter is, most, at least good leaders, they don't want to micromanage you any more than you want to be micromanaged. Now, again, there's new managers, there's petty managers, there's bitches, just people that have really bad personality traits that shouldn't be in management. That does happen. But when you have good leaders, if they're micromanaging you, they're doing it so you'll leave. And that's the only time that I micromanage is if I'm like, I gotta put it just enough attention on this person for this person to feel uncomfortable, and not, because if somebody's fucking off and not doing a good job, the last thing they want to do is talk about that. Because the questions become difficult to answer. What'd you get done this week? What can I expect from you next week? And then when you have a follow-up conversation, if you're diligently on top of those things, the people that aren't getting work done, they don't want to answer for that. The only reason they were quietly quitting in the first place is because you fucking let them. So, anyways, but that being said, I also like to acknowledge there's a lot of bad management out there. And honestly, when you experience that, you're not going to change them, and HR's not going to be on your side. You're not going to go get the win, and the manager's gone because they're a jerk. And even if they did something really egregious and you did get them fired, HR's going to get rid of you too because you're a troublemaker.
I must have butterflies in my stomach.
The best thing to do when you realize that a job is toxic, if you want your pound of flesh and try to take somebody with you on the way out, that's fine. But you need to just go get another job. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's a toxic work environment, you got to leave. Even if it was good pay, even if you once upon a time liked the place, if it's toxic, it's time to fuck.
So the funny thing is, right, and this is kind of anecdotal, but what I would say is, in my life experience, 90% of people, when they feel that pressure Roger's talking about, will just leave. The ride is over. There's a new manager in town with a new culture, and all your former coworkers are leaving, and the vibe that was there isn't there. People realize, okay, the ride is over, or what I have been used to is changing, and they'll leave on their own. 5% of people will bury their head and really try to keep their job and force themselves to be pushed out. Then there's the 5%, which are my favorite, are the ones that do have their ear to the ground. And as those types of documentation and phone calls start to happen, one of two things happens. They slip and they hurt themselves, and now they're out on disability. Or they immediately contact HR with a discrimination claim so that any further movement like that is viewed as retaliation, and they try to take that battle. And I would say 30-40% of the time, the asshole employee who tries to take that battle will win, because companies will have bad management, as Roger talked about, somewhere up the food chain, and they'll mishandle the process. And once there's any possibility of retaliation against somebody for whistleblowing or for bringing up a violation of policy or for defending themselves against discriminatory behavior, sexual harassment, and sexual harassment's usually the one that pops up the most. Now you can't really manage someone out as easily, because most of what you do is going to be subject to that claim. And so you do get those people who will head themselves off, which is why good managers don't open their mouth and tell everybody that they're maneuvering somebody out. and the culture is a little more quiet about what like the actual objective goal at the top of the food chain is, because there are people who will know it's coming, and all of a sudden they get a claim in before the workplace is able to do something. And if you can get that in, it's kind of like, and this is horrible to say, every divorce attorney in the world will tell you, if you're the one who wants the divorce and you're leaving, drain the bank accounts, take the car keys, change the locks on your fucking rental property, like essentially get possession over all the shit that both of you technically own and go put it somewhere. And then notify someone, hey, I'm leaving you, I'm getting divorced. Which is horrible and morally shitty. But every divorce attorney in the world would say, okay, are you the one making these steps? Awesome. You go get the money, pull the shit, change the things, put it in a different bank account, change the codes, you know, drive both of the cars over to your brother's and fucking take the keys, put them in the garage, and leverage yourself so you're in fighting fit shape on these things. And employers do the same thing when they're getting rid of you, and certain employees will, you know it's coming, and rather than leaving, they're lacing up the gloves and they're ready to go. And those situations are always bloody.
So, Brent, there's another little move that we do in sales that's a little bit.
Did they kick me?
Did we lose you?
No, he went back on mute.
He went on mute.
While we're waiting for Roger, the other thing that's popular to do is to use the medical.
Can you not hear me?
No.
Now we can. You were on mute.
You were muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, for fuck's sake. So I was going to say, like in sales, we have this other little trick that we can do where you create these little micro promotions that, let's say if I have a team that maybe has 12 people on it, you'll have 3 people with one title, 3 people with another title, 3 people with another, and 3 people with yet another. And if you have that extreme situation where you're like, okay, this fucking guy's going to be a lawsuit. This guy's going to be a fucking problem. This is a tricky thing to pull off, because HR won't fucking do it on their fucking own, but you have to, they know what you're doing, but you can't expect them to be in cahoots with you on it. What you do is you make the case that, hey, I want to restructure the team. I'm going to eliminate this title. And so we're just going to completely eliminate the title. And then what happens is you have collateral damage. So you have somebody that you wanted to get rid of, and let's say there's 2 other people. Maybe they're great, maybe they're not. And then what you can do is you can, if there's somebody worth saving, you open up a rec under one of the other titles, you bring them under that particular title, and then you eliminate a position. By eliminating the position, and you're eliminating multiple people, their idea of like they were discriminated against. No, we just eliminated a position. And so I've seen this happen multiple times. I may or may not be guilty.
The thing that Google did at one point, in their corporate team, which I thought was brilliant, is, and then they got sued and they managed to survive it. And I don't know if they still do this, but what they would do is when offering someone a new role, right? Let's say it was someone you wanted to get rid of, they'd offer them what was essentially a promotion into a new role in a new department. And they would be like, hey, here's this role. I just need you to resign from your role and take on this role. And in the same meeting, they would take the resignation and they would onboard this person. Well, now you're in a probationary period and it's far easier to fire your ass. And so people who've been there for 10 years, your 10 years doesn't matter. You just resigned. And now you are hired as a new hire and they onboard you into a new department. And then you're under probation, and the probationary terms would be tighter, and they'd fire the person. So this person thinks they're getting promoted, and what it really is they're getting pushed into the ability to be on a hypersensitive probation and pushed out the fucking door. And it was interesting because they were doing it at like mid-level C-suite positions, and it was hilarious because people didn't see it coming because they saw a promotion. And they went, oh, cool, let me just sign this resignation and let me sign this. Awesome, it's just paperwork. And they cleared out entire teams doing that at one point. And it was an interesting maneuver.
Damn, that's genius. I gotta give a shout out to Google. Well,
That's cold-blooded.
We'll say we'll do another. Well, this is probably unique to consulting. So in consulting, we bill per hour, right? So like we're probably billing between like 300 to 600 depending on the level. So if you can't get when they know someone's going to leave or get pushed out the door, they just won't staff them on projects, and then the company can use the argument that you're not billable or your utilization is too low, and therefore that's a performance issue. So because of that, because the management has colluded that no one's going to staff you, you get pushed out for performance problems, which I think is a genius, kind of cutthroat way to do it, but it's kind of genius.
Large law firms used to do that, is they would just make sure that somebody had the shittiest fucking clients and the shittiest caseload and, you know, things that would suck up a shit ton of firm time and resources. And then they'd look at that quarterly and go, okay, you billed this many hours and those cases brought in this much money and you're this much higher of a resource suck than these other people who are comparable to you. We got to get rid of you. Sorry, this isn't efficient. And, you know, you would have partners playing that game. And at bigger law firms, you'll have senior partners and named partners. And there's definitely some politicking game that goes into which associates kind of climb up the branch of which one of them onboarded them and brought them in. And you'll see that type of purging sometimes at the law firms.
Also will say, like, with layoffs too, like, it really is, like, so my company had a layoff last year, and apparently, like, okay, so one of my friends is a director at the firm, so apparently partners were overriding manager decisions to fire people or to put them on the list of getting removed, right? So they had a preliminary list, and then from that list, the partners were like, nope, we're keeping this one, we're keeping this one. So, like, sometimes middle managers can try and fuck you, and if you have the right leadership support, you can survive. It's super. I mean, life in general is super political, but
well, we had that a few years ago. So, for people who don't know, the court staff at federal courts are they work for the U.S. Marshal Service. They're U.S. Marshals, and under a particular department for the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Marshal Service was downgrading out particular positions and eliminating them and kind of restructuring in a way to reallocate budget. And so what happened is a lot of judges, so let's say one of my court staff that is a marshal assigned to my courtroom, they quit, they die, they leave, whatever, right? They're gone. They are replaced by somebody that I select out of the pool of who the U.S. Marshal Service makes available. And then it's signed on to by the supervising judge for that courthouse or that district. And so you can't just go pluck who you want, but you can pluck certain people. So what was happening is judges were firing their own staff so that somebody else could pick them up so that they were not available to be restructured or pushed out. And so you had this period where dozens of marshals were in between their old job and their new job and in a position where HR couldn't flush them out or couldn't reallocate them. And it was just a technical thing that if you were in the middle of that transfer, they couldn't touch you. Like, you were safely in this protected bubble, and certain people figured it out and it made its way through. And so a lot of the people who were supposed to be purged out held onto their jobs because the judges who liked them talked to other judges, and everybody just fired and transferred their staff around so that they were in this limbo interim transfer bubble of bureaucracy that takes fucking 40 days. And they basically survived the flood. And that type of shit happens in every industry. Which is why you should build relationships and, be a good worker, do your best, and build relationships with the right people, because when the floodwaters come, there's not enough room for everybody in the safety boat.
The Titanic up in here, half of these people have to drown. That's how horrible layoffs were last year. Like, people were like, Deloitte was doing like 3 or 4 rounds of layoffs. Like, it's been a weird last 2 years in consulting.
When you're assessing people in a tight economy and you're looking at a team of who are the people that you must keep, right? Where it would be painful if we lost these people. You start assessing what is the risk that they're going to leave on their own? What is the risk that, that they'll leave because of, some other, change that you're going to make that's going to, they're going to become less productive because you're making these changes. Typically, it's a very small number of people that you deem must stay. And if you have a company that's got great benefits and a lot of resources, you can throw money at it. You can say, hey, we're going to give you a payment, increase in salary. We can also, if you don't want to do that, you can give, so you do the merit increase based on their performance, or you can say, hey, we're going to give you an equity grant. It's going to vest. That's a really good one because that locks them in. Like, so if you have good employees, you lock them into, a vesting period of, let's say every, invest every 6 months over a 2-year period, or vest every year over a 4-year period, and you start allocating, stock to people. This really works to keep the people that you want. And then, and then the people that you can, that you want to leave, you should not give them anything, because especially if they're used to in good times getting something, they know that like what that means. And so oftentimes they'll say, fuck, if I'm not getting, they'll either be offended and want to go find something else, or they'll just say, oh shit, I'm on the shit list. I better find something before I get clipped. And you can just by doing shit like that, even if you have a planned workforce reduction that's coming later in the year, you can make sure that workforce reduction is a little bit smaller by getting people out of there before that time comes. The hardest part is the people in the middle, because your A players you're going to bend over backwards to keep. Your D players, they're the ones that are going to get be out. You should never have F players. And then the question is, what do you do with your B's and C's? In good times, you're working to make your B players A players and your C players B players. But when times get really tight, how much are you willing to invest in your C players? And that's a really tough one, because some of those, it's hard to make a distinction sometimes between B and C players, and that can be like it depends on how you measure it, like over a quarter, over a year, over the last 5 years. How am I viewing this B or C player? And so it gets tough. So if you really want to make sure you have job security, you should try to be an A.
I think that's true, but I think it's not even just like an A player. It's also like, I guess to be an A player, you have to have like the political background just to validate that. So I guess I see where you're coming from. I was going to take it a different route. It's like you could be a great performer at your job and like still not make it. Like we had a guy who got cut even though he was amazing at his job because he was kind of an asshole. But I guess that wouldn't really make him an A player. He was kind of an asshole.
Yeah, if you're a cultural problem, if you're somebody that makes people around you less productive, fuck off. Like, because then you have to. And the only way that really works is if you're in the type of business where nobody has to see that person, and like you've got like one person that manages them that knows that they're an asshole, but it doesn't impact anybody else because there's no exposure. But if you're in a fucking office, rule number 1: don't hire assholes. And if you figure out that you have an asshole, do not allow their productivity to save them. Like, get the assholes out. They're just not fucking.
Yeah, we have one lady. She got fired because 4 people who were reporting up to her resigned consecutively. So HR was like, oh wait, it can't just be like literally 4 people back to back to back. The director was like, what's going on here? And the HR and the director decided to fire the